The snow was falling so thick I could barely see the porch light. My fingers were numb, fumbling with the house key, but the lock wouldn't turn. It didn't just feel stuck, it felt solid. Inside, I could see the warm, amber glow of the fireplace my father built with his own 2 hands. I pounded on the door, the vibration rattling my frozen arm. Suddenly, the porch light flickered on. My stepdad, Richard, appeared behind the glass. He didn't open the door. He just stood there, wearing my father's old flannel shirt, holding a cup of coffee. He leaned in close to the pane, his breath fogging the glass. "Go away, Leo. This isn't your house anymore. I've changed the locks, and I've already moved your boxes to the curb. They're probably under a foot of snow by now." "Richard, open the door," I screamed, my voice cracking in the sub-zero wind. "It's 10 degrees out here. You can't do this." He just smiled, that slow, oily smile that had been creeping into our lives for 3 years. He pulled the heavy oak bolts shut with a definitive thud. He thought he had finally won. He thought that with my mother gone, he could finally erase me from existence and take the mountain estate for himself. He was so busy enjoying his triumph that he forgot one tiny legal detail. He forgot that while he might have married into the family, he never bothered to check the county records. He had no idea that in exactly 48 hours, he wouldn't just be losing his coffee, he'd be losing the very roof over his head. I'm currently sitting in the cab of my old truck, the heater blasting, but I can't stop shivering. I'm looking at the pile of cardboard boxes sitting in the driveway, slowly turning into white mounds of ice. Everything I own is in those boxes. My childhood photos, my college degree, the watch my dad gave me before he passed. It's all being buried in a blizzard because Richard decided that today was the day he became the king of the castle. The conflict is simple: greed. After my mom passed away 6 months ago, Richard's mask didn't just slip, it shattered. He went from the supportive, grieving widower to a cold, calculating squatter. He's convinced himself that because she was my mom's husband, everything she owned, including this house, now belongs to him and his deadbeat son, Toby. Betrayal is a cold thing, but injustice is colder. I've spent the last 6 months trying to be patient, trying to grieve with him, even though I knew he was looking at the furniture like it was an auction catalog. But tonight was the breaking point. He waited until I went to pick up groceries to swap the cylinders in the deadbolts. I can see him through the window now, laughing with Toby. They're drinking the expensive scotch my dad saved for my wedding day. They think I'm just a kid who lost his parents and has nowhere to go. They think I'm weak because I've been quiet. They have no idea that the silence they've been ignoring was actually me spending my lunch breaks at the courthouse. Richard thinks he's the owner. He's about to find out he's just a guest who overstayed his welcome and the bill is due. This house isn't just wood and stone, it's a map of my life. My father, Thomas, was an architect who believed that a home should breathe with the mountain. He spent 5 years building this place. I remember the smell of fresh cedar shavings and the gritty feeling of sawdust in my hair when I was 5 years old. He let me help him lay the stones for the fireplace. "Leo," he'd say, his hands rough and warm, "a man's home is his legacy. You treat this land with respect, and it'll always give you a place to stand." My mom, Elena, was the heart of the house. She filled it with the smell of rosemary and lavender. We were happy here. Even after my dad passed away 10 years ago, the house still felt like him. Mom kept his study exactly the same. We were a team. We took care of each other. Then came Richard. He met my mom at a community fundraiser. He seemed perfect at first. He was a property manager, or so he said. He was charming, he listened, and he made my mom laugh for the first time in years. I wanted her to be happy, so I welcomed him. I even stood by her when they got married 3 years later. I remember the wedding day clearly. It was held right here, in the backyard overlooking the valley. Richard took my hand and looked me in the eye. "I'm not here to replace your father, Leo," he whispered. "I'm just here to help you and your mom protect what he built." I believed him. I really did. I saw the way he looked at the house, and I thought it was admiration. I didn't realize it was hunger. After the wedding, Toby moved in. Toby was 22, my age, but he was Richard's shadow. He didn't work, he didn't help, he just sat in the living room playing video games and leaving cigarette burns on the mahogany tables my dad had hand-carved. My mom started getting sick shortly after. It was a slow, cruel decline. Richard was always there, handling the paperwork, managing the finances, making sure she was comfortable. I was finishing my senior year of college, and every time I came home, the house felt a little less like mine. Richard started moving my dad's things to the attic. He replaced the rosemary plants with sterile plastic decorations. "It's for your mom, Leo," he'd say whenever I complained. "She needs a fresh start. Too many memories make her sad." I stayed quiet because I didn't want to stress her out. I watched her fade away in the bedroom she once shared with my father, while Richard sat in the kitchen already talking about upgrading the kitchen to increase the property value. The day she died, he didn't cry. He just asked where the deed was. That should have been my first real warning. The red flags started as small things, the kind of things you excuse because you're grieving. 2 weeks after the funeral, I went into my dad's study to find Richard sitting in his leather chair, feet up on the desk, shredding old blueprints. "What are you doing?" I asked, my heart hammering. "Those are my dad's original designs." "They're clutter, Leo," Richard said, not even looking up. "I'm turning this into Toby's gaming room. We need to modernize. This house is a dinosaur." I felt a surge of rage, but Richard just chuckled. "Don't get emotional. Your mother wanted us to move on. I'm the head of the house now. It's a lot of responsibility. You should be thanking me." Then came the favored son treatment. Richard started giving Toby my dad's old tools that were meant for me. I'd find Toby in the garage trying to fix his beat-up car using my father's precision chisels as screwdrivers. "Those aren't yours, Toby," I told him one afternoon. "Dad says everything in this garage is ours now," Toby sneered, blowing smoke in my face. "Get over it, man. You're just a guest here until you find a real job." Richard started forgetting to include me in dinner plans. I'd come home from my job at the local engineering firm to find them finished with a meal, the kitchen a mess, and no food left for me. "Oh, sorry, Leo," Richard would say, wiping his mouth. "We thought you were staying out. You're such a busy professional now, we figured you had it covered." The dialogue became increasingly sharp. Richard started asking me about my plans. "You're 24, Leo," he said during one of our rare conversations. "It's time you stood on your own 2 feet. This house is too big for 3 grown men. Toby and I are going to start some renovations, and frankly, you're in the way." I realized then that he wasn't just being a jerk, he was trying to push me out. He was trying to make the environment so hostile that I would leave on my own. He started losing my mail. He cut the internet to my room, claiming it was a bandwidth issue. The favoritism was blatant. Toby got the master guest suite. I was told to keep my things in a corner of the basement because my room was being repainted. The paint never came. I was sleeping on a cot among my dad's old boxes, while Richard and Toby lived like kings upstairs. I felt like a stranger in the house my father built. I felt like a mistake in Richard's new, perfect life. But I stayed silent. I was waiting for the probate court to finish. I was waiting for the mask to fully fall off so I could see exactly what I was fighting. The stakes increased significantly when Richard decided to put the house on the market without telling me. I came home one Friday to find a for sale sign being hammered into the frozen ground by a local realtor. "What is this?" I asked, walking up to Richard, who was standing on the porch, looking proud. "Market's peaking, Leo," he said. "I've decided to sell. Toby and I are moving to Florida. We'll get a nice condo on the beach. No more snow." "You can't sell this house," I said, my voice trembling. "This is my father's house. This is my home." "It was your mother's house," Richard corrected, his eyes turning cold. "And she left it to her husband. That's how marriage works, kid. You'll get a small cut, of course, maybe enough for a down payment on a studio apartment in the city. Be grateful." "I haven't seen the will yet," I argued. "The will is being processed," Richard snapped. "My lawyer is handling it. Don't worry your little head about it. Just start packing." That was 3 weeks ago. From that moment on, it was war. Richard began cleaning out the house. He held a garage sale while I was at work. I came home to find my dad's vintage record collection being sold for $5 a piece to strangers. I had to buy back my own memories from people on my own lawn. "Richard, stop this," I yelled. He just shoved me aside. "Don't touch me, boy. I'm the owner here. I do what I want. If you don't like it, the door is right there." The antagonist's actions became clear. He wanted to liquidate the estate and disappear before I could challenge anything. He knew that once the house was sold and the money was moved to an offshore account or a Florida condo, I'd have a hell of a time getting it back. He started bringing contractors through the house, mostly his shady friends, who talked about ripping out the cedar walls and putting in cheap drywall. They laughed about flipping the place. Every word was like a knife in my dad's legacy. Toby became even more aggressive. He started accidentally breaking my things. He tripped and spilled red wine on my only suit. He forgot to close the garage door, letting the pipes freeze in my work area. "Oops," Toby would say, grinning. "Guess you should have moved out sooner, huh?" The stakes reached their peak when Richard handed me a legal-looking document. "This is a voluntary quitclaim," he said. "Sign it. It just says you waive any future interest in the property. It'll speed up the sale. If you sign it, I'll give you $20,000 cash today. If you don't, I'll make sure you get nothing but the clothes on your back." He was trying to bully me into signing away rights he didn't even understand. He thought he was being smart. He didn't realize that by threatening me, he had finally given me the push I needed to go to the one person who knew the truth. The secret wasn't in the will. Richard was right about one thing. My mom's will was a mess. She had left her all property to her husband. Richard thought that was the end of the story. But 3 days ago, I went to see Mr. Henderson, not the CEO from the other stories, but Silas Henderson, my father's old law partner and the man who had helped him draw up the original deed 25 years ago. Silas was 80 years old, with eyes as sharp as a hawk. He sat me down in his dusty office and pulled a yellowed file from a cabinet. "Leo," Silas said, his voice a low rumble, "your father was a brilliant man, but he was also a cautious one. He saw how many of his friends lost their family land in messy divorces or bad business deals. When he bought that mountain lot, he didn't put his name in his name alone." "What do you mean?" I asked. Silas slid a document across the table. It was a copy of the original deed. I looked at the names under the Owners section. Thomas Thorne and Leo Thorne as joint tenants with right of survivorship. I stared at it. My name is on the deed since I was 5? Your father put you on the deed the day he finished the house. He wanted to make sure that no matter what happened to him, or even to your mother, the house would always belong to you. In a joint tenancy with right of survivorship, the property doesn't go through probate. It doesn't matter what your mother's will says. The moment your father passed, the property became yours and your mother's. And the moment your mother passed, it became yours alone, 100%. I felt a wave of relief so powerful I almost fell out of the chair. Richard wasn't the owner. He wasn't even a co-owner. Because my father had set it up this way, the house had never actually belonged to my mother in a way she could leave to Richard. But Richard thinks he's selling it. He's been talking to realtors. "Let him talk," Silas said, with a wicked glint in his eye. "He can't sell what he doesn't own, and since he hasn't checked the deed, probably because he assumed husband meant owner, he's currently committing real estate fraud." Silas handed me a certified copy of the deed and a formal eviction notice. Now, Silas said, we wait for the right moment. Let him think he's won. Let him get right to the edge. That's when the fall hurts the most. I tucked the papers into my jacket. I had the hidden advantage. I had the document that would destroy his plan logically and legally. I just had to wait for the public moment where his humiliation would be absolute. The countdown began. Richard had scheduled a closing celebration for tonight. He had found a buyer, some corporate developer, and they were coming over to sign the preliminary papers. He had invited the neighbors, the realtor, and his shady friends. He wanted to show off. I spent the 48 hours before the party in a state of high tensile nerves. I had to pretend I was defeated. I had to let him lock me out in the cold tonight, just as I described in the hook. I sat in my truck, watching the minutes tick by on the dashboard clock. 6 p.m. The guests start arriving. I see the fancy SUVs pulling into the driveway, splashing slush onto my boxes. 7 p.m. The realtor arrives. She's carrying a briefcase, looking professional and efficient. 8 p.m. Richard and Toby are in the living room, holding court. I can hear the music through the walls. The internal struggle was real. Part of me wanted to just burst in and end it, but Silas told me to wait. Wait until the buyer is about to sign, he had said. The legal fallout for Richard will be much worse if he tries to execute a fraudulent contract. I looked at my phone. I had a text from Silas. I'm parked at the end of the driveway. Say the word. I felt a surge of anticipation. I was freezing. My toes were dead, but my heart was on fire. I thought about my dad. I thought about the stone fireplace we built together. I thought about my mom's rosemary plants. I was doing this for them. I got out of the truck. The wind bit into my face, but I didn't care. I walked up to the porch. This was the moment. Richard had locked me out thinking he was the king. He was about to find out he was just a trespasser. I took a deep breath, pulled out my phone, and called the local sheriff's department. I had already cleared this with them earlier in the day. This is Leo Thorne. I'm at my property. I have unauthorized individuals refusing to leave, and I'm ready to serve the eviction notice. We're 2 minutes out, Leo, the deputy said. I looked at the front door. The amber glow was still there. The laughter was still loud. I stepped onto the porch and hammered on the wood one last time. This wasn't a plea for help. This was a knock from the owner. Richard opened the door, his face flushed with scotch and triumph. I told you to leave, Leo, he barked, his voice carrying over the music. The guests in the living room went silent, turning to look. The realtor was sitting at the dining table, her pen poised over a contract. Ma'am, I'm Leo Thorne. I'm the sole owner of this property. Richard here has no legal right to sell this house, and if you let your client sign that contract, you'll be participating in a felony. The realtor's face went pale. She grabbed the paper from my hand, her eyes scanning the joint tenancy clause. Richard, she asked, her voice sharp, what is this? You told me the probate was closed and you were the sole heir. He's lying, Richard shouted, his face turning a terrifying shade of purple. That's a fake. I'm the husband. The house goes to the husband. Not in this state, Richard, Silas said, stepping through the front door, followed by 2 uniformed deputies, and certainly not when the son was put on the deed 20 years ago. Joint tenancy bypasses wills. It bypasses husbands. It belongs to Leo. The emotional explosion was beautiful. Richard started screaming at Silas, then at the deputies. Toby tried to take a swing at me, but the deputy pinned him against the cedar wall, the same wall my dad had finished by hand. You little rat, Richard hissed at me, his mask completely gone. I spent 3 years taking care of your mother. I earned this house. You didn't earn anything, Richard, I said, my voice cold. You tried to steal a dead man's legacy while his son was still grieving. You're not a husband. You're a parasite. The guests were scrambling for the door, looking horrified. The realtor was already packing her bags, muttering about lawsuits and professional liability. The closing celebration had turned into a crime scene. The deputies didn't just stand there. They checked the deed. They checked Silas's legal brief. "Mr. Thorne," the lead deputy said to me, "since you are the owner and you have a formal eviction notice, would you like us to remove these men?" "Yes," I said, "and I want to press charges for the destruction of property and the theft of my father's tools." Richard was sputtering. "You can't do this. I have nowhere to go. All my money is tied up in the renovations I planned." "That sounds like a you problem, Richard," I said. "Maybe Toby can find a job. I hear the local car wash is hiring." The satisfying reversal was seeing Richard and Toby being marched out into the same cold they had locked me into. They didn't even have their coats. The deputies told them they could wait for a formal time to collect their personal belongings, but they had to leave the premises now. I watched through the window as they stood in the snow, shivering as the sheriff's cruiser lights flashed against the white mounds of my boxes. "Leo," Silas said, putting a hand on my shoulder, "your father would be damn proud. You held your ground." "I just wanted my home back, Silas," I whispered. The reversal was absolute. Richard's plan to flip the house and run to Florida was dead. The corporate buyer was gone. The for sale sign was kicked over by the deputy on his way out. I looked at the fireplace. The fire was still burning. I walked over to the mahogany table Toby had burned. It was scarred, but it was solid. It was a Thorne table. I had lost my mom and I had lost my dad, but I hadn't lost my place in the world. I had destroyed the antagonist's plan not with violence, but with the very thing Richard hated most, the truth. The legal fallout for Richard was devastating. Not only was he evicted, but the corporate developer sued him for breach of contract and misrepresentation. They had already spent thousands on inspections and legal fees, and they wanted it back. Richard tried to sue my mother's estate to claim his share, but Silas was ready. We countersued for the embezzlement of my mother's personal funds and the theft of the household items he had sold at the garage sale. Since Richard had no job and no assets other than the money he'd stolen, he ended up in a massive amount of debt. Last I heard, he and Toby were living in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment above a noisy bar. Toby is indeed working at a car wash. The social fallout was just as harsh. Our small mountain community is tight-knit. When word got out that Richard had tried to lock me out in a blizzard to steal my dad's house, he became a pariah. No one would hire him. No one would speak to him. The emotional fallout was quieter. I had to spend weeks cleaning up the mess they left. I had to scrub the smoke smell out of the curtains and fix the cigarette burns in the wood. But every time I sanded a surface or polished a stone, I felt like I was bringing my dad back into the house. I brought the rosemary plants back. I replanted them in the same spot my mom had kept them. The consequences were clear. Richard lost everything because he tried to take everything. He underestimated the quiet kid. He thought that being loud and aggressive made him powerful. He didn't realize that in the world of law and legacy, the quietest person in the room often holds the strongest hand. It's been 6 months since that night. The mountain is green now, the snow replaced by wildflowers. I'm sitting on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the valley. The house feels like it's breathing again. I finished the renovations, the real ones. I restored my dad's study. I even found a few of his old blueprints that Richard hadn't managed to shred. I'm framing them and hanging them in the hallway. I'm no longer the shivering kid in the truck. I'm the man who takes care of this land. I've started my own small firm, working out of my dad's study. It's quiet, it's peaceful, and it's mine. I realize now that the joint tenancy wasn't just a legal trick. It was a message from my father. He knew that life is unpredictable. He knew that people can be greedy and cruel. By putting my name on that deed when I was 5, he was telling me that I would always have a place where I belonged. I've grown up. I'm not just an engineer or a survivor. I'm a thorn, and I know what that means now. It means being level. It means being solid. It means building something that can stand up to the blizzard. I still miss my mom. I still miss my dad. But when I sit by the fireplace we built together, I don't feel alone. I feel their presence in the stones in the cedar. The house isn't a museum anymore. It's a home. And the best part? The locks are new, but I'm the only one who has the key. Family can be our greatest strength, but sometimes the people we call family can be our greatest challenge. My story is a reminder that you have to stand up for yourself, even when you're grieving and even when you're afraid. I want to ask you, have you ever had a Richard in your life? Someone who tried to take advantage of you when you were at your lowest? How did you find the strength to fight back? Legal battles are exhausting, but protecting your legacy and your peace of mind is always worth it. If you're going through something similar, remember, knowledge is power. Check the deeds, read the contracts, and never be afraid to ask for help from the Silases in your life. If you were moved by Leo's journey to reclaim his father's legacy, please hit the like button. It really helps the channel share these stories with people who might be going through the same thing. And make sure to subscribe and turn on the notifications so you don't miss our next story of justice, resilience, and emotional truth. Tell us your story in the comments. We read every single one of them. Thanks for being part of the Thorn family today. See you in the next one.